I was pouring my morning coffee when my 8-year-old granddaughter leaned in close and whispered, "Grandpa, after the party today, Mom and Dad are going to take your money." Her tiny voice hit me like a lightning bolt, splitting apart whatever illusions I still had about family loyalty. I'd always been the kind of grandfather who gave without hesitation, who believed the best in them. But that day, I left the party early, pretending I was just tired. Inside, I was already crafting a plan, sharp, deliberate, one that would turn their betrayal back on them. And believe me, they didn't see it coming. Saturday morning had been quiet, sunlight spilling across my kitchen table, steam curling up from my mug. Then the phone rang, 7 a.m., of all times. Not typical for my son, Daniel. His voice crackled down the line, rough and nervous, like it used to sound back when he was a teenager and had dented my car. "Hey, Dad. Listen, we really want you to come to Emily's birthday today." The words stumbled out too quickly, like he'd practiced them but forgotten the beat. "Daniel," I said, leaning back in my chair, "when have I ever missed Emily's birthday?" There was a pause, and I could hear his wife, Jessica, in the background, her tone sharp and insistent. "It's just that Jess has been planning this for weeks," he added. "She wanted me to make sure you're coming." That caught my attention. Jessica, the same woman who barely tolerated my presence, suddenly eager for me to show up early? I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream spiral like tiny storms. "That's thoughtful of her," I replied evenly, though my gut told me something was off. Years in business had taught me to spot a sale pitched by someone who didn't believe in the product. "The party's at 2, Daniel went on, "but maybe you could come around 1:30. We want to talk about family stuff." In all my 3 years of living alone since my wife passed, family stuff had never needed its own special meeting. "What kind of family stuff?" I asked. "Oh, planning, future things. Jess has ideas about us all being more involved." I walked to the window, phone pressed to my ear, and watched Mrs. Thompson across the street watering her flower boxes. Jessica, of all people, talking about family involvement, the same woman who spent last Christmas scrolling on her phone through the whole meal. "Sure," I said at last, keeping my tone steady. My eyes drifted to the fridge, where Emily's crayon drawing hung beside my grocery list, a crooked little house with stick figures labeled Grandpa, Daddy, Mommy, and me. That little girl had been my brightest light since my wife, Margaret, died. "I'll be there early. Wouldn't miss it for the world." "Perfect," Daniel said. Then his voice dropped. "And Dad, keep an open mind about what we want to talk about, okay? It's all about making sure everyone's taken care of." Before I could ask what that meant, the line went dead. I just stood there for a moment, phone in my hand, feeling that same unease I'd felt years ago when Daniel was 8 and I caught him sneaking money from Margaret's purse for candy. But this didn't feel like some small, harmless mistake from when Daniel was a kid. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, trying to push away the unease sitting heavy in my chest. Maybe Jessica truly wanted to work on family relationships. Maybe I was just overthinking a simple invitation. But as I settled back at the table, I kept circling back to that phrase, making sure everyone's taken care of. From my experience, when people used words like that, they were often talking about taking care of themselves first. My eyes drifted to Emily's drawing again, and despite the knot in my stomach, I smiled. Whatever Daniel and Jessica had planned to bring up could wait until after we celebrated my granddaughter's 8th birthday. Some moments mattered more than adult problems. Still, I made a quiet promise to myself. I'd be listening closely when that conversation happened. 20 minutes later, I was in my bedroom closet, staring at shirts Margaret would never see me wear again. The blue Oxford shirt tugged me right back to her funeral, to the moment Jessica had leaned over and whispered about all this space while we were burying my wife. Even then, something in her tone had felt calculated. I pulled the shirt from its hanger and caught my reflection in the mirror. $70,000, that's how much I'd given them over the past 3 years. Mortgage payments, car repairs, Emily's private school tuition. Margaret might have thought it was too much, but she would have also believed Emily deserved better than her parents could provide on their own. My wallet felt heavier than usual as I dressed. 3 credit cards maxed out for Daniel's so-called emergencies, the urgent transmission repair that turned into a full engine rebuild. Jessica's temporary request for grocery money that somehow became a monthly tradition. Every ask delivered with Daniel's guilty eyes and Jessica's perfectly timed gratitude. Heading toward the kitchen to grab my keys, I passed the refrigerator where Emily's latest masterpiece still hung. She'd drawn our last fishing trip, 2 stick figures standing beside a blue crayon lake, both smiling wide. "Best day ever, Grandpa," she'd written in purple marker at the bottom. That's when Jessica's recent comment hit me fresh. Just 3 weeks ago, standing right here, she'd looked around my kitchen and said, "Norman, don't you think this house is getting a little too big for you? There are some lovely assisted living places where you wouldn't have to worry about upkeep." Daniel had quickly steered the conversation toward Emily's softball season, but Jessica's eyes had lingered on my granite countertops, on the appliances Margaret and I had chosen together. She'd had that same calculating look she wore at the funeral. I scooped up my car keys, remembering Margaret's last clear words to me. "Promise me you'll always take care of Emily. But watch Daniel carefully, he's weak. And weak people make dangerous choices when someone strong is whispering in their ear." At the time, I thought she meant his drinking buddies or those get-rich-quick schemes. Now, I wondered if she'd seen something in Jessica that I'd been too blind to notice, the way she always wrapped money talks in Emily's needs, making me feel selfish for even hesitating. The garage door opener rumbled as sunlight spilled across my Mercedes. Margaret's car still sat in her spot, spotless and covered. I'd kept up the payments for months after she passed, not ready to admit she was gone. Maybe that's exactly what they were counting on, my inability to say no when it came to family. I've always been the kind of grandfather who'd rather hand over money than see disappointment, who'd rather believe the best than dig for the truth. But after 40 years in construction, I also knew, before you build anything that matters, you check the foundation. I eased my SUV out of the driveway, watching my house grow smaller in the rearview mirror. By the time this day was over, after whatever conversation Daniel and Jessica had in store, I had a feeling I'd be seeing everything in a different light. For now, my mission was simple: get my granddaughter something special for her birthday. Maybe the last gift I'd give her before everything changed. Northridge Mall was already buzzing with Saturday morning energy by the time I pulled in and found a spot near the main entrance. 8:15, and families were already streaming toward the toy stores. Perfect time to shop for Emily's presents. The Lego architecture display caught my eye right away. Emily had been fascinated by buildings ever since her school's field trip to the Gateway Arch last month. I spotted the Statue of Liberty set, just challenging enough for her growing skills, but not so hard it would frustrate her. $180 felt fair for something that could keep her curious mind busy for weeks. "Excellent choice, sir," the young clerk said with a smile as he rang it up. "My daughter loves this series. Want me to wrap it?" "Yes, please, it's for my granddaughter's 8th birthday." Next stop, sporting goods. Emily had been hinting about wanting a real bicycle, not the little pink one she'd long outgrown. In the window, I saw the perfect fit, a sleek Trek model with a lightweight frame, hand brakes she could manage easily, and reflective strips for safety. $320. But her smile would be worth every penny. I loaded the boxed bike into my SUV and checked my watch, 9:10. Plenty of time for one more errand. Norman. What a nice surprise. I turned to see Dorothy Thompson walking up, a bookstore bag in her hand, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She'd been my neighbor for 15 years, and she looked genuinely happy to see me. "Dorothy, good morning. Out early." "Oh, you know me," she said with a grin. "I like beating the crowds." She glanced at my shopping haul. "I suppose you're getting ready for a certain birthday party. Daniel mentioned it when I saw him last week." "He did?" I asked, closing the SUV's hatch. "Where'd you run into him?" "Downtown," she said thoughtfully. "Tuesday morning, I think. Jessica was with him, and they were just coming out of First National Bank with quite a stack of papers." Dorothy chuckled. "Looked very official." Probably refinancing something. Young folks do that all the time. Tuesday. 4 days ago. Daniel hadn't said a word about bank business during his nervous phone call this morning. But then again, people handled financial matters without announcing them. Probably just routine, I said, shifting the bags in my hand. Of course, dear. None of my business anyway, Dorothy said warmly, patting my arm. Give my love to that sweet granddaughter of yours. She headed toward the bookstore, leaving me with a faint unease. Bank papers on Tuesday. Nervous phone call on Saturday. The timing was interesting. But Daniel was always in some kind of financial scramble. I shook off the thought and made my way toward the florist near the east entrance. Jessica had always liked flowers, and white roses felt like a polite gesture for the hostess of Emily's party. The florist was a middle-aged woman with dirt under her nails, moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd been wrapping bouquets for decades. She bundled a dozen long-stemmed roses in silver paper, tying the ribbon just so. These are beautiful, she said, straightening the bow. Special occasion. My granddaughter's birthday party, I told her. They're for her mother. How thoughtful. She'll love them. $28 for flowers that would be wilting in a week, but if they earned Jessica's please smile, it was worth it. Sometimes, little gestures kept the peace in a family, especially when you could feel tensions humming under the surface. By 9:30, my SUV was loaded with nearly $600 worth of birthday celebration. The Lego set, the bicycle, the roses, and a carefully chosen card, all picked with Emily's happiness in mind. That's what grandfathers do. We spoil our grandkids without shame, and we love every second of it. As I drove home through Saturday morning traffic, Dorothy's casual remark kept replaying in my head. Daniel and Jessica at the bank with a stack of papers, serious expressions, official business. Daniel hadn't mentioned it, but couples handle all sorts of errands without broadcasting them. Insurance renewals, mortgage refinancing, maybe even starting a college fund for Emily. Any of those could explain it. Still, as I turned into my driveway, that small voice in my head refused to quiet. If everything was just routine, why had Daniel sounded so nervous this morning? After wrapping Emily's gifts and grabbing a quick lunch, I pulled up to Daniel's place exactly at 2 o'clock. The front door swung open before I could even ring the bell. Norman. Jessica practically sang my name, arms opening wide like we hadn't seen each other in months instead of just a few weeks. You look absolutely wonderful today. Her enthusiasm caught me off guard. Normally, she gave me a polite smile, a quick hug, and vanished into the kitchen. But today she touched my arm twice as she spoke, her eyes lit with a kind of energy I'd never seen aimed at me before. Thank you, Jessica. The party looks beautiful, I said, stepping inside with the wrapped bike box and the bag holding the Lego set. Streamers hung from doorways, balloons filled the corners, more elaborate than any of Emily's past birthdays. Dad, there he is. Daniel's voice boomed from the living room like he was announcing a special guest. Come meet Mike from work. Mike, this is my amazing father I've told you all about. Amazing father. Daniel usually talked about me at work in terms of my old-school business habits or how stubborn I was about retiring. But today, he slapped my shoulder with almost theatrical warmth, his laugh a little too loud in the decorated hallway. The living room was buzzing. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson from next door stood chatting near the fireplace while Mrs. Smith perched on the couch, watching everything with sharp eyes. Carlos and Elena Martinez were helping their son, Tommy, set up party games on the coffee table. And then, Grandpa! Emily came running toward me, her smile so real it cut through the strange, artificial cheer of the room. She wrapped her arms around my waist, and for a moment, the world felt right again. Happy birthday, sweetheart, I said, handing her the gift bag. Open this one first, then the big surprise. She peeled the paper carefully, eyes widening when she saw the Statue of Liberty Lego set. But when she looked up to thank me, something flickered across her face. There was a shadow in Emily's eyes, sadness that disappeared the moment Jessica stepped closer. Isn't Grandpa generous, sweetheart? Say thank you properly. Thank you, Grandpa. It's really, It's really cool. Her voice held true gratitude, but underneath, I caught something else. Guilt, maybe worry. And no 8-year-old should sound that weighed down on her own birthday. Daniel steered me toward the kitchen, where Mike Davidson was nursing a beer and making small talk about car sales. On the surface, the conversation was normal, but Daniel kept jumping in with unnecessary compliments. My business sense, my leadership, my so-called wisdom about life. It all sounded rehearsed, like he'd been handed a script and hadn't quite memorized it right. Dad knows everything about building strong relationships, Daniel announced to Mike. He's taught me so much about trust and family loyalty. Trust and family loyalty, odd topics for a birthday party chat, especially with the slightly manic energy he had now. Mike nodded politely, though I could tell he was uncomfortable with how over-the-top Daniel was being. Jessica reappeared with a plate of appetizers, sliding in between me and the other guests. "Norman, you have to try these canapés," she said brightly. "I made them with your sophisticated taste in mind." My sophisticated taste? Jessica had never once paid attention to my food preferences, outside of making sure there was enough to go around at family gatherings. But now, she hovered by my side, topping off my wine before I'd even finished it, asking if I was comfortable every few minutes. From across the room, I spotted Emily working through a pile of cards from her school friends. She opened each one politely, but her movements felt mechanical. When Tommy Martinez asked about her new Lego set, she gave a smile and a nod, but there was none of the bright spark I'd expected. "She's growing up so fast," Mrs. Smith said, settling beside me on the couch. "Such a thoughtful little girl. Last week, she asked me if grandparents and parents ever disagree on important decisions." I froze mid-sip. "What did you tell her?" "That families work through their differences with love and honesty," Mrs. Smith said, though her eyes stayed fixed on Emily with a look that told me she was thinking about something deeper than a child's curiosity. Across the room, Daniel and Jessica exchanged one of those quick, silent glances I'd been noticing all afternoon. A flicker of eye contact, a small nod, a perfectly timed change of subject any time a conversation seemed to drift somewhere they didn't want it to go. The afternoon wore on with its forced merriment and careful staging. Every smile looked planned, every laugh came a beat too late, every affectionate gesture felt meant for show. The only thing that seemed real was Emily's affection toward me, but even that was shaded by whatever weight she was carrying. As the party wound down and guests began gathering their things, Daniel caught my eye with an overly casual wave. "Dad, stick around after everyone leaves, okay? Jess and I have been looking forward to that family chat we mentioned." The fake cheerfulness was pressing down on me now, thick and heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I excused myself politely, saying I needed the bathroom. Jessica jumped up to give me directions I didn't need, her concern sounding more like a line in a play than something real. As I stepped away from the noise, I noticed Emily standing by the gift table, watching me. There was something in her expression, a mix of worry and determination, that stopped me in my tracks. I'd barely stepped into the hallway lined with family photos when I heard small footsteps behind me. "Grandpa." Her voice was barely more than a whisper. I turned, and Emily was glancing back toward the living room, checking to make sure no one else was around. The birthday girl, who should have been shining with excitement, looked instead like she was carrying the weight of the world on those little 8-year-old shoulders. "What is it, sweetheart?" I knelt so I could meet her eyes, recognizing that serious look she'd inherited from Margaret. "You look troubled." She bit her lower lip, exactly the way her grandmother used to when she had to say something difficult. "I need to tell you something important about Mom and Dad." My chest tightened. "What about them, honey?" "They're planning to take your money. Tonight." The words tumbled out fast, like she'd been practicing them. "After everyone goes home. I heard them talking last night when I was supposed to be sleeping." The hallway seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, forcing my expression to stay calm for her sake. "What exactly did you hear?" "Mom said, you have too much money for an old man living alone." Emily's voice dropped even lower. "She told Dad they were going to fix that problem tonight." Dad sounded scared, but Mom said the papers from the bank would make everything legal. Papers from the bank. Dorothy Thompson's comment about Tuesday's visit came rushing back, and suddenly it all made sense. Terrible, perfect sense. My business instincts, quiet for years, snapped awake with sharp clarity. Did they say anything else? I asked, keeping my tone gentle even as my mind raced ahead. Dad kept saying, "What if he finds out?" And Mom said it would be too late by then. Her eyes filled with tears. "Grandpa, I don't want them to take your money. You're the only one who really listens to me." I pulled her into a fierce hug, feeling her small body trembling. Margaret's granddaughter, forced to carry a secret no child should have to bear. The betrayal cut deeper knowing they'd spoken of this where she could hear. "Listen to me carefully," I whispered into her hair. "You did the right thing telling me. But we need to keep this between us for now. Okay? Can you do that?" She nodded into my shoulder. "Are you going to stop them?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to handle everything." I held her back so she could see the certainty in my eyes. "But we need to go back to your party now and act like everything's normal. Can you be brave for me?" "I think so." She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Will you still love me if Mom and Dad get mad?" The question hit like a punch to the chest. "Emily, nothing your parents do could ever change how much I love you. Nothing. Do you understand?" Her face softened, relief washing over her. The smile she gave me then was the first real one I'd seen all afternoon. "I love you too, Grandpa." Hand in hand, we walked back toward the sounds of the party. But in those few whispered minutes, everything had changed. The son I'd raised. The daughter-in-law I'd supported. The family I'd trusted completely. All of it now seen through the cold, clear lens of betrayal. As we rejoined the crowd, I caught Daniel's eyes across the room. He smiled and waved, wearing the same false enthusiasm that had puzzled me earlier. Now I knew exactly what that performance was meant to hide. Returning to the party felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone else had forgotten they were acting. But I knew my role. And 40 years in business had taught me exactly how to wear a smile while I planned my next move. While politely nodding through Mrs. Smith's story about her garden, I was also keeping a mental ledger, every shared glance between Daniel and Jessica now landing in my mind with a new, cutting clarity. Daniel checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. And, right on cue, Jessica appeared at his side. Their brief eye contact wasn't random, it was deliberate, practiced. They weren't just hosting me, they were managing me. Making sure I stayed comfortable, engaged, and, most importantly, present for whatever they had planned after the guests left. "Norman, how about some more wine?" Jessica's hand touched my arm in a way that looked caring but felt calculated. "You look a little pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Pale? Probably. Learning your own family has a plan to strip you of everything you've built will do that to a man." But I managed a small, weary smile. "Just a slight headache, but I'm fine." Her face shifted, barely. The kind of micro-expression I'd learned to read across boardroom tables, a mix of relief and calculation. A tired, slightly unwell grandfather was easier to handle than one who was sharp and on guard. For the next hour, I played my role flawlessly. The gracious grandfather. The generous patriarch. The aging man who maybe wasn't quite as quick as he used to be. I let them fuss over me, praised their hospitality, and studied them like chess opponents, tracking every coordinated move. Daniel steered conversations away from anything remotely financial. If a guest mentioned the economy or retirement planning, Jessica would smoothly redirect toward my house, my health, my future living arrangements. They were controlling the flow of information, making sure nothing popped up that might contradict whatever story they had planned for tonight's important family discussion. By 5:30, the afternoon shadows were long, and guests began gathering their things. I decided it was time to test their reaction. "I think I should head home early," I said. "This headache isn't getting better." The change was immediate. Daniel and Jessica shared a look that was more alarmed than polite. "Dad, wait," Daniel said, stepping in front of the door. "We really wanted to talk about those important family matters we mentioned. Remember? You promised to stay after everyone left." "Perhaps another time," I said, keeping up the weary act. "I really need to rest." "But Norman." Jessica stepped closer, her voice tightening. "We have something special planned for tonight. Something we've been preparing for weeks." The bank visit Dorothy Thompson had seen. The legal papers. The carefully timed plans that needed my cooperation. I could see the edge of desperation creeping into their polished performance. "I'm sure it can wait until tomorrow," I said lightly. "Family isn't going anywhere." Daniel's face flushed. "Actually, Dad, there are some time-sensitive issues we need to discuss. Financial matters that can't wait. Financial matters that can't wait." The exact words I'd expected. I tucked them away with the rest of the clues I'd collected throughout this strange, telling afternoon. "Tomorrow, son. I promise." Then I turned toward Emily, who had been watching us with worried eyes. Kneeling down, I pulled her close, what might be the last innocent hug we'd share before the truth came out. "Thank you for the most wonderful birthday party, sweetheart. Thank you for coming, Grandpa." Emily's small arms tightened around my neck. "I love you so much." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know," I whispered into her ear, low enough for only her to hear. "Everything's going to be okay." When I stood, Daniel's hand came down on my shoulder, heavier than necessary, almost like he was holding me in place. "Dad, please, just give us an hour. 1 hour to talk about these important family decisions." I looked straight into my son's eyes and didn't see the boy I'd raised. I saw a desperate man, one whose greed had smothered whatever love was left. The truth of it cut deeper than I expected, but my voice stayed steady. "Another time, Daniel. I need to go home now." I walked to my car while they stood in the doorway, Jessica whispering sharply in Daniel's ear, both of them tense, their frustration radiating across the yard. By the time I slid into my Mercedes, I felt the weight of my performance lifting. For a moment, I just sat there, engine off, processing what had happened. My family had been planning to take everything I'd worked for, tonight, with legal papers and a carefully staged setup. Starting the engine, I pulled away from the house where I'd just celebrated what might be my last, normal family gathering. Inside my own home, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was loaded. I went straight to my office, the same room where I'd grown my construction company from one truck and sheer stubbornness into something real. Behind Margaret's portrait on the wall, the safe waited. My hands found the combination by muscle memory, 18-19-59, Margaret's birthday. There was an irony to it. Her memory was now helping me protect what we had built together. Inside, the files told a story I should have read more carefully. Bank statements that mapped out the slow escalation of their requests, from a few hundred to several thousand, over 3 years. Investment portfolios worth far more than Daniel or Jessica had any idea about. Property deeds for rentals they didn't even know existed. And most telling, records of every payment I'd made to prop up their lifestyle. 247 separate transactions. I documented it all with the same methodical precision that had made my business thrive: mortgage payments, car repairs, medical bills, private school tuition for Emily. Every payment neatly justified at the time as some emergency or opportunity. Sitting at my desk, Margaret's picture watching from the bookshelf, I finally saw it for what it was. The endless requests weren't random. They'd been training me, conditioning me, to say yes to bigger and bigger amounts. Jessica's talk about assisted living? That wasn't concern. It was scouting. Every mortgage payment, every tuition check, I said aloud to Margaret's photograph. They've been planning this for months. My phone sat silent on the desk. I could imagine Daniel and Jessica right now, scrambling, wondering how to move forward without me there for their important family discussion. The thought gave me a grim kind of satisfaction. I reached for my old business card file and found James Miller's number. 20 years of friendship and professional trust with the Vice President of First National Bank. James knew me as the contractor who never missed a payment, never broke a promise. More importantly, he'd know exactly what legal documents signed under false pretenses meant, and what could be done about them. The clock read 9:30 p.m., too late for business calls. Still, I jotted down a list for the morning. First priority, find out exactly what papers Daniel and Jessica had gotten their hands on, and figure out how to strip them of any legal bite. Next, I pulled out my will and trust documents, standard arrangements I'd made back when I still believed my son was guided by love for his family, not hunger for money. Everything was set to go to him, with provisions for Emily's education and future. That would change. And quickly. Catherine Davis had notarized most of my legal work over the years, independent, discreet, and not tied to any bank where Daniel or Jessica might have friends. She'd be another call on tomorrow's list. Spreading my investment statements across the desk like a general reviewing battle plans, I calculated my true net worth for the first time in years. $2.3 million in liquid assets, 3 rental properties, and my fully paid-off house. Far more than Daniel or Jessica imagined, and certainly more than they could take in one night's legal maneuver. But this wasn't about the money. This was about justice, for an 8-year-old girl whose own parents had burdened her with adult secrets. This was about punishing people who would exploit an old man's love. This was about making sure betrayal carried consequences. Margaret's voice drifted back from our last real conversation. Watch Daniel carefully. Weak people make dangerous choices when someone strong is whispering in their ear. I saw it now. Jessica had been whispering for years. And Daniel had chosen greed over loyalty every single time. The sudden ring of my phone snapped me out of my thoughts. Daniel's name glowed on the caller ID. I let it ring. By Sunday morning, the clarity I'd been searching for had arrived. After a night of tossing and turning, I woke with my instincts sharpened and a specific plan forming. Coffee in hand, I opened my old business contact file and found James Miller's personal number. 9 o'clock felt like the right time to call an old friend about finances. James and I had been connected for over 20 years, through loans, investments, and watching my construction business grow. He trusted my calls, and I trusted his advice. "James, sorry to bother you on a Sunday morning," I said when he picked up. "Norman, always good to hear from you," he replied warmly. "What's on your mind?" "I've been reviewing my investments and thinking about consolidating. Maybe centralizing everything to make it easier to manage. What's the bank's current stance on financial assistance programs?" "Well," he said, "there are a few routes, depending on what you're looking for. Are you talking about automated management services, or something more comprehensive?" The perfect opening. Actually, I've been curious about power of attorney arrangements, conservatorship. Have you had any clients dealing with those lately? There was a pause, and I could almost hear him weighing what he could say. "Funny you should ask," James said. "Just last week, I had a couple asking about guardianship procedures for an elderly family member." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "Oh, I imagine that's a complex process." "Actually, they seemed quite prepared," James said. "They'd done a lot of homework on conservatorship, requirements, documentation timelines. Very thorough people." Very thorough. My son and daughter-in-law had researched exactly how to take away my independence with surgical, legal precision. "That's thoughtful of them, helping their family," I said evenly. "They were asking detailed questions," James continued, "about mental competency evaluations, financial documentation, timelines for court approval. Honestly, they understood the process better than some attorneys I've worked with." Mental competency evaluations. Court approval timelines. The picture sharpened in my mind. They hadn't just planned to grab my assets. They'd planned to have me declared incompetent and take control of everything I'd spent 40 years building. "Did they seem confident?" I asked. "Absolutely. They said they had documentation ready, medical opinions lined up, and that things would move quickly once they started. Even asked about expedited processes, emergency conservatorship, for situations where immediate action is needed to protect someone's assets from themselves. Elderly care transitions. That was the phrase James used earlier, and it made my hand tighten around the phone. My son and his wife had mapped out how to lock me away and strip me clean, and they'd done it with professional-grade efficiency. Sounds like they really care about their family members' welfare, I managed. That's what struck me most, James said. The preparation. They wanted everything done legally and swiftly. Well, I appreciate the insight, James. Gives me a clearer sense of my options. Anytime, Norman. Honestly, you sound sharper than men half your age. I can't imagine you'll need that kind of help for decades yet. If only he knew how close I'd come to needing it yesterday. Let's hope you're right. Thanks for taking my call on a Sunday. Always a pleasure. Let me know if you want to set up a consultation about your portfolio. When I hung up, I stared at the notes I'd scribbled, mental competency evaluations. Documentation ready. Medical opinions prepared. Emergency procedures. Daniel and Jessica hadn't just been planning to rob me, they'd built an airtight legal framework to make it look justified. The phone rang suddenly, breaking my thoughts. Daniel's name lit up the screen. This time, I answered. Hello, I said, letting deliberate weariness slow my words, as though reaching for the phone had taken effort. Dad, thank God, Daniel said, sounding concerned, though now I could hear the calculation behind it. I was worried when you left early yesterday. You feeling all right? Oh, Daniel. I let my voice trail, as if finding the right words was difficult. I've been having these awful headaches. Hard to focus lately. That's not good. Maybe we should have you checked out. Jess and I can drive you to the clinic this afternoon. Perfect. They were moving faster now, exactly as I'd hoped after throwing off their original timeline. That's very thoughtful of you both, I said. I've been feeling so confused lately. Don't worry, Dad, he said. We'll take care of everything. We'll be over in about an hour. When the call ended, I spent the next 30 minutes preparing for the performance of my life. I mussed my hair just enough to look like I'd rolled out of bed, pulled on an old cardigan that made me look smaller, older, and practiced slower, more hesitant movements, like every step took effort. By the time their car rolled into my driveway, I was ready. Norman, we brought some papers that might help with your situation, Jessica said as they stepped into my living room. She was carrying a sleek leather portfolio, the kind lawyers use for important, expensive business. Papers. I blinked at her with what I hoped looked like genuine confusion. What kind of papers? Daniel leaned forward, his face all earnest concern. Dad, we've been researching ways to help you manage things better. Your finances, medical decisions, that sort of thing. Manage. I rubbed my temples as if the word itself hurt. Everything feels so complicated these days. Jessica opened the portfolio with the efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed it. These documents would give us power of attorney. We could handle your banking, bills, medical appointments. Think of it as a backup system. The forms were neat, organized, highlighted where they wanted my signature. Someone had put serious money into this theft. I stared at the papers like they were written in code. It's all so overwhelming, I murmured. I used to understand these things better. That's exactly why we need to do this now, Jessica pressed, her voice soft but insistent. Before things get more confusing for you. Daniel shifted in his seat. Dad, are you sure you're okay? You seem different today. I gave him what I hoped passed for grateful confusion. Different? I don't feel different. Just tired. These headaches make it hard to think straight. They exchanged a look, the same kind of glance I'd seen at the party, but now I knew what it meant. They were sizing me up, deciding whether I was impaired enough to sign without realizing what I was doing. Norman, These papers would just make it easier for us to help you, Jessica said. You wouldn't have to manage everything by yourself. I suppose that might be nice, I said slowly, lifting one page with hands that trembled just enough to sell the act. But this is such a big decision. My head's pounding trying to think about it. Of course, it's a big decision, Daniel said quickly. Take your time. Jessica's smile tightened. Don't you think it would be easier with family help? You trust us, don't you? Of course I trust you. Your family. I set the papers down carefully. But could I maybe sleep on it? Decide tomorrow, when I'm thinking clearer. These headaches make everything so fuzzy. Their eyes met again, and I saw the flicker of frustration on Jessica's face before she smoothed it away. Sure, Dad, Daniel said. We'll come by tomorrow morning, and you can sign then. When the door closed behind them, I let my posture collapse, dropping the act for the first time in hours. The documents they'd left told the whole story. Power of attorney forms that would have handed them total control. My finances, my medical decisions, even where I lived. Everything James had warned me about, spelled out in cold legal language. 3 hours later, I was in my home office, the papers spread across my desk like enemy blueprints. I went over my notes from their visit, the way a general studies a battlefield. These weren't just forms, they were the keys to my life, and they thought I was going to hand them over. Every signature line was neatly highlighted in yellow, every witness requirement marked with precision. They'd done their homework, just not as well as I had done mine over the last 40 years. Catherine Davis picked up on the second ring. Norman, good evening. What can I do for you? Catherine, I need notary services tomorrow morning for some family financial documents. Could you come to my house around 10? Of course. What kind of documents are we talking about? I chose my words carefully. Power of attorney forms. It's a sensitive family matter, so I'd appreciate your discretion. You can count on that. I'll bring my seal and journal. Perfect. Catherine had notarized dozens of contracts for my construction business over the years. She'd spot irregular pressure tactics in seconds. It was part of her training. Next call, James Miller. James, could you stop by tomorrow morning around 10? I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday and would like to review my portfolio in detail. Certainly, Norman. After what we discussed about financial management assistance, I think a thorough review would be wise. Excellent. It might be educational. James chuckled. I'll bring the necessary paperwork. See you at 10. Educational, indeed. James would see firsthand whatever Daniel and Jessica tried to pull, and as a bank vice president, he'd understand exactly what was happening. More importantly, his presence would give my side of the story legal weight. Final call, Daniel. I let my voice carry the same shaky uncertainty I'd performed earlier. Daniel, I've been thinking about those papers you brought. You were right, I do need help managing things. Dad, that's wonderful. Jess will be so relieved. We can come over first thing tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a notary to make everything proper and legal. 10 sharp. Perfect. And Dad, thank you for trusting us with this. Trust. The word tasted bitter, but I made it sound warm. You're my family. Of course I trust you. After hanging up, I walked to the window that overlooked Margaret's rose garden. I tended it myself since she died. Tomorrow would decide whether I kept caring for it as a free man, or whether I'd be staring at it from the window of some assisted living facility while Daniel and Jessica carved up our life's work. I took a yellow legal pad and wrote out the plan. 9:45, Catherine arrives, sets up her notary kit. 10 o'clock, James arrives with his portfolio materials. 10:05, Daniel and Jessica arrive expecting an easy signature. 10:10, two professionals witness their manipulation tactics. 10:15, the truth comes out. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd built their whole scheme around legal procedures, forgetting those same procedures required proper witnesses and records. Tomorrow, those requirements would expose them. Across town, Daniel was probably telling Jessica how cooperative I'd sounded, how the notary would make everything official, how close they were to taking control of millions. They'd be celebrating tonight. Confident. Certain that the confused old man had finally agreed to their help. They had no idea they were walking into a trap, set by the same business mind that had built the fortune they were trying to steal. I glanced at Emily's drawing on my refrigerator, our stick-figure family standing beside a crooked little house. Tomorrow would decide whether that little girl grew up with grandparents who protected her, or parents who taught her that loyalty could be bought and sold. Margaret's voice echoed from 3 years ago, "Promise me you'll always take care of Emily." I intended to keep that promise. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I'd barely slept, but when Catherine showed up at 9:45 with her notary seal and journal, I felt completely ready. "Good morning, Norman," she said warmly, setting her materials on the side table. "Beautiful office. This should be straightforward." At exactly 10, James knocked, his banker's portfolio under one arm. "Morning, Norman. Ready for that portfolio review?" "More ready than you know," I said, positioning myself behind my desk as footsteps sounded on the porch. Daniel and Jessica walked in with confident smiles and their leather document case. They hesitated when they spotted Catherine and James, but Jessica recovered quickly. "How thoughtful of you to arrange professional assistance," she said smoothly. "This will make everything so much more official." "Indeed, it will," I replied, my voice stripped of the frailty I'd worn yesterday. "Please, everyone, take a seat." Daniel sat directly across from me, still smiling. "Dad, you sound much better today. More like your old self." "Exactly like my old self," I said. "Sharp, observant, capable. Which is why I need to tell you something before we sign anything." Jessica's pen froze above her checklist. "Norman, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong with me, Jessica. But I am fully aware of your plan." The silence went tight and thin. Daniel's smile cracked. "Dad, what plan?" "We're here to help you. I know about your visit to James's bank last Tuesday. I know about the guardianship procedures you researched. I know about the mental competency evaluations you plan to arrange." Daniel's color drained. Jessica's carefully arranged expression slipped for just a moment before she tried to recover. "Norman, you're confused. We went to the bank about our own planning." "James," I cut in, turning to my friend, "would you mind telling us what they actually discussed during their Tuesday appointment?" James cleared his throat. "They asked detailed questions about conservatorship procedures, documentation requirements for declaring someone mentally incompetent, and expedited court processes for emergency financial control." Catherine looked up from her notary journal, suddenly attentive. "Mr. Price, are you saying these power of attorney forms were prepared under false pretenses?" "I'm saying they planned to have me declared incompetent, so they could take everything I've spent 40 years building." Daniel found his voice, though it was thin and strained. "Dad, we were worried about you. Yesterday you seemed so confused." "Yesterday," I said evenly, "I was acting. Today, you're seeing exactly who I am." I opened my desk drawer and slid out a folder. 247 documented transactions over the last 3 years. $70,000 in so-called family support. Mortgage payments. Car repairs. Private school tuition for Emily. All neatly itemized. Jessica leaned forward, desperation fraying her voice. "Those were legitimate family expenses." "Those," I said, my voice hardening, "were conditioning payments, training me to say yes to larger and larger amounts, until you thought I'd sign away my independence." I looked straight at Jessica. "You researched exactly how to have me institutionalized, while you divided my assets." Catherine set her pen down. "This is highly irregular. I need to understand the full situation before notarizing anything." "The full situation," I said evenly, "is that my son and daughter-in-law spent weeks learning the legal steps to take my money. They met with lawyers about guardianship. They planned to have me declared mentally incompetent, based on fabricated signs of confusion. Daniel's hands gripped the chair arms, knuckles white. We just thought you might need help managing things. Help managing a net worth of $2.3 million, plus 3 rental properties? My tone sharpened. Help that meant talking to attorneys about emergency conservatorship? Jessica stood abruptly. You're twisting everything. We love you. Love doesn't involve conspiracy, I said flatly. Love doesn't involve planning how to steal someone's independence while they're still healthy and capable. James spoke calmly. Norman, their questions at the bank were very specific. They knew terminology most families never touch unless they're planning something serious. Catherine nodded. In my experience, legitimate family planning doesn't involve mental competency evaluations. The only sound was Daniel's uneven breathing. He looked at me then, really looked, maybe seeing, for the first time, the man who built the fortune they tried to take. What happens now? He asked quietly. I stood, feeling every year of my age, but also every ounce of my hard-earned resolve. Now we talk about consequences. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the documents I'd prepared over the weekend. I'm changing my will immediately. Everything will go into an educational trust for Emily, accessible when she turns 21. Dad, please. Daniel's voice cracked. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. The trust will cover her college, graduate school if she wants, and seed money for a career. Catherine, I need these witnessed and notarized. Jessica's voice wavered. Norman, you can't do this to your own family. I'm protecting my family, I said firmly. From parents willing to steal their child's grandfather's independence to fund their lifestyle. Catherine reviewed the documents. These terms are specific. There are conditions. Yes. If Daniel and Jessica renounce all claims to my estate and show genuine change over the next year, I'll reconsider. But they'll have to prove they've become the parents Emily deserves. James nodded as he signed as witness. The trust is well structured. She'll have every opportunity you could want for her. Daniel's voice was a whisper. What does genuine change mean? How do we prove it? By getting jobs that actually support your family. By putting Emily's happiness above your own spending. By showing me she matters more than my bank account. Jessica's composure broke. How are we supposed to live without your support? The same way millions of families do, through honest work and responsible spending. The mortgage help ends today. The car payments stop immediately. You both have college degrees. Figure it out. Catherine finished notarizing with brisk efficiency. Everything's binding now. My attorney will have copies before the day's over, I told her. After Catherine and James left, the three of us sat in silence. Daniel looked beaten down. Jessica's eyes darted, already calculating her next move. Anything else you want to say? I asked. Daniel met my eyes for the first time since this began. I'm sorry, Dad. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. Jessica stayed silent. That told me everything. Words are cheap, I said. Actions, over the next year, will decide if this family survives. 3 hours later, Emily knocked on my door, still wearing her school backpack. Grandpa, Mommy said you wanted to see me? I knelt, like I had in the hallway 2 days ago. Come sit with me, sweetheart. We need to talk about some grown-up things. She climbed onto the couch beside me, already sensing the seriousness. Is this about what I told you? Partly. Your mom and dad made some bad choices about money, and there have to be consequences. But none of this changes how much I love you. Are they in trouble? They need to learn how to take better care of themselves, and you. But your future is safe. I've made sure you can go to any college you want, study anything you like. Her eyes brightened. Even veterinary school? That's really expensive. Especially veterinary school, I said with a smile. And if you change your mind and want to be an engineer, a teacher, or start your own business, there'll be money for that too. What about mommy and daddy? They're going to work very hard to become better parents. If they succeed, maybe we can heal. But even if they don't, I pulled her close. You and I will always have each other. She hugged me tight, and for a moment I felt Margaret there too. 3 generations bound together, even after betrayal. Can we look at college brochures? She asked. I want to see what veterinary schools look like. Absolutely, I said, reaching for my laptop. We've got all the time in the world to plan your future. Outside, spring was leaning into summer, and Margaret's roses were starting to bloom again.